As the clock struck 11 p.m. on July 8, 1993, 10-year-old Nikki Wasilishin approached her mother sitting on the couch in the living room. Giving her a tight bear hug and a goodnight kiss, little did Nikki know that this would be the last time she would ever embrace her mother in her arms. The bittersweet moment of love and affection shared between a parent and a child now serves as a memory from the past. Despite the tender age, Nikki was not aware of the permanent void that would be left in her heart from that night on. Hey, hi, hello friends. Happy Thursday. I am back yet again for another episode of True Crime with Kenz. I am your host, Kenzie, and today we will delve into the extremely frustrating case that shattered the hearts of so many families involved, the murder of Stacy Wasilishin. As always, complete show notes are available at truecrimewithkenz.com. These include source articles and my overall thoughts on this case. For this episode, I have some links of some resources as well as some images of Stacy provided to me by Nikki. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that these are real people and real tragedies that we will be discussing today. Please be kind when leaving a comment or discussing this case on social media out of respect for the victim's family. This podcast is for educational purposes, and this is all information that I have found on the internet, and I have compiled it into a single recording. All opinions in this podcast are mine and mine alone. Nothing should be done in compliance with the information provided in this podcast episode. This episode will be an exception to that rule. Stacy deserves justice and her family deserves closure. At the end of this episode, I'm going to list the resources available for us to help push attention to Stacy's case. These resources will also be listed in the case notes. This case is one of the most frustrating cases I have ever personally heard, let alone cover. I had the privilege of interviewing Nicole, who goes by Nikki Wasilishin, for this episode. And I did want to take the time to personally thank Nikki again for sitting down with me for the 2 hours that she did, answering my questions, allowing me to get to know her and her mother better. Nikki is such a strong woman and has been doing so much for her mother's case, and I really, really, really look up to her for doing what she's doing on the behalf of her mother. This podcast episode will be a little bit different than the others that I have done. I really wanted Nikki to be the one who talked about everything, and then I'm will be your clarifying voice throughout. So there will be a lot of switching back and forth from the audios. So it'll go from the interview audio of me and Nikki talking to me speaking to you directly like I am now. I have made it super easy to follow through the magic of editing, but I did want you guys to be aware that there will be a lot of bouncing back and forth. All of that being said, we do have a few disclaimers for this episode. As always, we will be covering sensitive details regarding death, so please keep that in mind before we get started. And at the time of the murder, Nikki and her sister Christina were present in the home, and Nikki and I did discuss these details in our interview, and I wanted to give that disclaimer just in case hearing that from the perspective of a child of their parent getting murdered and them being in the home. If that is a topic that is too heavy for anyone, now is your fair warning. But other than that, all of that being said, let's get into today's case. Stephine Marie Wasilishin was known to those around her as Stacy, which is what I will be referring to her for the remainder of this episode. Stacy was born June 1st, 1961 to parents Harry and Bernice Wasilishin in Chicago, Illinois. Stacy was a twin. Stacy's twin brother was named Stephen Henry Wasilishin, but sadly he passed away at just 7 months old from complications with measles. In my interview with Nikki, I wanted our sole focus for the first part of the interview to be to really get to know Stacy and who Stacy was. Nikki, being Stacy's daughter, didn't have a whole lot of insight on Stacy's childhood growing up, but she did speak to me about some of the stories that her aunt Wendy has told her throughout the years regarding Stacy's childhood. According to these stories, Stacy by no means had an easy life, and I want you guys to hear this part of Stacy's story from Nikki herself.
My mom did not have a good childhood growing up. My mom was a twin, and her twin died of the measles about 7 months in. And for some reason, my grandma was very upset that the Stephen died and Stacy lived. And everyone in the family will even attest to the fact that my mom was like abused, and grandma wasn't nice to her. And my mom's closest friend Lori Swift will even tell you that Grandma B she had a rough childhood. She even sent away my mom to her aunt or her sister for a few years. My mom was raped by my grandma's next husband, Bruce. They didn't have a good childhood. And she eventually, when she was able to go out on her own, 17, 18 and start her own life. And when she got pregnant with me at 19, she wanted to start, and she wanted to be a mother, and she wanted to be a good mother for what she didn't have. Yeah, she had it rough, dude. Grandma B was not nice to my mom. But, eventually when she went out and forged her own and got her own kid, I remember grandma being really cool. Like, I didn't see that mean part of grandma B. Like, I saw grandma as cool. But the stories I've heard about what grandma did to mom, like made her kneel on rice and like beat her with a coffee pot cord and like just, discipline in the 60s and 70s. If you want to break it down, my mom was definitely just a homemaker. She lived and breathed to be the home body, to bake, to cook. She was always because she was a pastry chef, she was always making stuff at home. If she was making chocolate chip cookies, we got to lick the beaters. Christina and I each got a beater to lick. She was very involved in our schooling. What was her favorite color? I'll quote that from another podcast that I had this question before. Before my sister was born, my mom was probably like 24, 25, because I was very young. This was, we were at an apartment complex at a pool party in Phoenix, and somebody said, "Hey, Stacy, what's your favorite color?" And she smokes her cigarette, and she was like, "Green, because it's the color of weed and money." She was young, 25. She smoked weed. She was cool and very hip. And she it's like some women will sit and watch a lot of TV. My mom never sit on the couch. She wasn't one of those that, like, turn the news on and drink her coffee. And no, she got up and did stuff. She was very active with the children and dressing us up. She was always in the bathroom. You've seen pictures of her. She was always making herself look good. Big hair, big makeup. If you didn't look good, there was no reason to leave the house. She's very proud of herself. Very proud of her physique and what she had built with her children and making her children look like her and little mini, like, little models and stuff. So if you want to know, like, the type of woman she was a very proud homemaker that loved her children.
Stacy always wanted to be a mother. She was a simple woman who dreamed of having children and giving her children the life she wished she had. When Stacy was around 18, she fell pregnant with her partner at the time, Craig. Stacy was excited to start this next chapter of her life, but Craig was in his early 20s and didn't have the same family aspirations as Stacy. Although Craig passionately loved Stacy, he wasn't ready to be a father. And from the time Stacy was 19, she had given birth to Nikki, and despite still being in a relationship with Craig, he was focused on growing his construction business, and being a father was the last thing on his mind. Stacy was operating as a single mother, taking care of Nikki and being an active mother in her life.
Yeah, my mom really did go it alone. She had me at 19. My dad didn't want me. She'd had abortions before me. So what broke them up? He didn't want children. She wanted to be domesticated, do the whole family thing. And he was, late 20s, wanted to build his career and his, his company. He wasn't interested in it. And she came along, and this other dude come along that wanted to build a little family unit, and they did. But I don't remember a lot with my mom and my dad. I was very little. I remember their relationship was very passionate. My dad loved my mom very much, but my mom, they both had big personalities, and they clashed a lot of passion there. So I remember that my mom and my dad broke up when I was about 3 or 4, and she met Russell, and he became a big part of my life in my early childhood. I don't really remember my dad much of early childhood until my mom dies. That's when my dad steps in, and my dad takes over the next part of my 30 years of my life. Like, my dad is my everything right now. But I really didn't know him before. I talked to him on the phone, I'd visit him, but I really did not have a relationship with my father until my mother died. It was Russell. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine, because I'm 41, I don't have any children. I couldn't imagine having a daughter at 19. I mean, she was a baby herself. And so I really see it that, as a child, I thought my mom was like the most biggest bitch too. I did not like my mom. Like, she used to, like, big punishments, smack my hair, put my head through a wall one time. I thought she was like abusive. As an adult now, as a 40-year-old woman, like, I see my mom as being very patient with a very, like, I have ADHD kind of like child there. And she really did. I grew with her in those early 20s. Like, she was raising a child at 20, 21, and she was doing it by herself without my dad. And I remember that she dressed me up a lot. She liked to make me like her little Barbie doll. She did a lot of the pictures, the big hair, and like all those big photo pictures. She liked to garden. I mean, she lived to do events with her children. Like, what are we doing with the kids today? Like, it wasn't just put them in front of the TV. She was very involved.
As the relationship between Stacy and Craig began to fizzle, Stacy met a man named Russell Bennett Peterson. Stacy was head over heels for Russell. He was like the breath of fresh air for her compared to the relationship she shared with Craig. As Russell came in, he swept Stacy off of her feet, being everything that Craig wasn't in their relationship. Russell wanted to have a family, which is all Stacy ever dreamed of, And at this point, Stacy leaves Craig, taking Nikki, who was 3 or 4 at the time, to start her new family with Russell.
So my dad and my mom broke up when I was about 3 or 4 when she met Russell Bennett Peterson. He was the exact opposite of my dad. The relationship was breaking down when she met Russell, and he was the exact complete opposite, like I said. And he swept her off her feet. Instead of being a construction worker and being out in the shop, he wanted to cook for her and romance her, and she just fell really hard.
Upon meeting Russell, he transitioned into a big part of Stacy and Nikki's life. Although Nikki noted that Russell had never been a father to her, his only real focus was Stacy. The 3 moved into an apartment in Phoenix together. In our interview, Nikki told me how it never really felt like they were a family. Russell never tried to bond with Nikki, and Nikki thinks that this is due to the fact that her father, Craig, and Russell did not like each other at all.
It was Russell. Russell was in my life for those early child development years. Mm-hmm. I don't remember him being a bad guy. I'm going to give him that. I don't remember him, spanking me or being overly mean to me, but he really wasn't interested in me. He didn't do things with me. He didn't want to play with me. He wasn't my dad. And like my dad and Russell didn't get along. And so I don't think he had any interest in bonding with me at all. I remember he was just my mom's boyfriend.
Russell, Stacy, and Nikki lived in the apartment, just the 3 of them, for a few years. Russell tended to long work hours as a chef, which meant Stacy was usually the one to arrive home first. As soon as Stacy got home, she would talk to Nikki about her school and begin working on dinner. While living in the Phoenix apartment, Stacy became pregnant by Russell with her second daughter, Christina. Upon the birth of Christina, Nikki noted that this was when the dynamic of the house changed to feel more like a family unit.
And then my mom got pregnant, and then my sister came along, and then it became more of a family unit. And he was a little bit more invested because now he had a daughter, and he was around more. But it was always Christina. I was really jealous, honestly, when she got pregnant. I didn't want the little sister, oh yeah, I want the little sister. I wasn't one of those. I didn't, and I knew it was going to take time away from me, and it did. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like my sister at first. And I grew to love her. She became the new little dolly, and then it became the 3 of us doing stuff together.
Even though it began to feel more like a family unit, both Russell and his family tended to acknowledge only Christina as Russell's child. This would upset anyone. The favoritism for Christina upset Stacy, knowing that Nikki was just as much her child as Christina. It really began to frustrate her, and this is where the tiffs in the relationship between Stacy and Russell began.
And even his mother, Phyllis, if Christmas time, they would come over and I would get one gift and Christina would have a whole wheelbarrow. And I remember my mom being very upset with the Petersons. You can't do that. You can't favor my one daughter just because she's your blood and not my other one. So, mm-hmm. I didn't have a relationship with the Petersons. It was my sister was their pride and joy. So when she came along, she transformed the family unit into, we did feel like a little bit of a family. But then when they moved us up to Sedona, she was still a baby, a year old or whatever. But that's when the relationship fell apart. I barely even saw Russell.
A year after giving birth to Christina, Russell and Stacy had an opportunity to open their own restaurant in Sedona, Arizona. This would be a fancy Italian restaurant, so the family packed up and moved from their Phoenix apartment to a 2-bedroom home in Sedona.
Then he was teaching my mom how to do all these culinary things, and together they became a little partnership, and they got an offer to open a fancy Italian restaurant in Sedona, Arizona. And this was a big deal because they were in their early 30s, a new little family. And we were living in an apartment in Phoenix. And now we were being moved up to Sedona where there's a house waiting for us. And they were going to manage this restaurant. So life was good.
In their home in Sedona, Russell and Stacy occupied the master bedroom. Christina had the room across from them. And the garage had been converted into a room for Nikki.
The Sedona house is a 2-bedroom home. So they needed the master for them, and they gave my little sister the bedroom. So they converted the garage on the other side of the home, which is down 3, down a lower level, down 3 steps.
After moving to Sedona, the restaurant took a majority of Russell's time. Stacy was the pastry chef for the restaurant, making sure that all of the desserts were covered and all of her duties as the pastry chef were taken care of. Then she would head home for the night. Whereas Russell, wanting the restaurant to be as successful as possible and also being the executive chef, would end up staying until closing, if not later.
Because Russell was really invested in that restaurant. He was the executive chef. He wanted to make it a success. And so that meant that he was there, 14, 15, 16 hours a day. My mom would come in and work, she was the pastry chef. She'd do the desserts, and then she'd go home and tend to the children. And she got very lonely. Domestic life, I don't remember Russell in Sedona at all. I remember my mom, the house, the dog, the cat, my sister. I remember us gardening a lot and doing a lot of stuff with the girls, but I remember my mom being really unhappy.
Russell wouldn't be home until late every evening, which caused Stacy to begin to feel lonely. On a typical night, Stacy, who was actively involved in her daughter's lives, would come home, and from the moment she entered the home, her focus was her daughters. Stacy would make sure any homework Nikki had was completed, and then she would begin dinner, and then getting the girls ready for bed. After getting the girls ready for bed, Stacy would call her sister every night and speak to her to curb her feelings of loneliness. On top of Stacy using Wendy, her sister, as a way to cope with the active loneliness she was feeling, Stacy began actively cheating on Russell. I can already hear the comments about this statement, but I want to pause here and say we do not know the details of Russell and Stacy's relationship. However, Stacy was very unhappy in this relationship and was on the verge of making plans to leave, which we will discuss later. I do want to add this here because this is an interesting piece of information for reasons we don't know, and it is impossible for us to confirm if this is true or not, but due to the infidelity on Stacy's part, it is believed that Russell was recording the phone conversations that Stacy was having. Again, it is impossible to confirm if this is true or not, but this is information that I wanted you guys to be aware of, as it may play a whole role into this case. However, at this point, it is just hearsay.
And now as an adult, I know that she had been actively cheating on Russell in Sedona because he wasn't giving her what she needed. Oh. He had whiskey dick. He couldn't even get it up. That's why she was cheating on him. That's all over the case. My aunt will tell you. My dad will tell you. My mom was a 32-year-old woman. She wanted it, man.
Yeah.
And so my dog had busted through the screen door, and the screen door man came to come fix it. She started having an affair with him. Mm-hmm. And that's why my dad's convinced that he was recording her phone calls because she was actively cheating.
Now that we've touched on the overall family dynamic and who Stacy was, I want to get into the details of the case. The night of July 8th was like any other night at the household. Stacy and Russell had planned to have an evening together after the girls had gone to bed, since Stacy was feeling increasingly neglected, and Russell had plans of heading to New York for a 2-week stay to attend culinary classes. As it started to get later in the evening, there was no sign of Russell. Stacy began to grow more frustrated and began drinking at this point in the timeline.
And on the night of her murder, they were supposed to have alone time, and he never got off of work and once again neglected her. And he was going out of town this weekend, and he was taking some of her money to go to Disneyland.
Stacy called her sister Wendy for their nightly talk. She began venting to Wendy about Russell and telling her about how unhappy she was. After getting off the phone with Wendy, Stacy called Craig, Nikki's father. Stacy stayed on the phone with Craig for a total of 107 minutes. On this 107-minute phone call with Craig, Stacy confided in him about the relationship she shared with Russell. This phone call to Craig was out of the ordinary. Most of the conversations that Stacy and Craig shared were regarding money or things to do with Nikki. Nikki noted in our interview how unusual this phone call between her parents was.
So she called my aunt at like 7:04, 7:06 or something, and starts to tell my aunt how unhappy she is. And then after about 30 minutes of venting to my aunt, she called my dad, and she'd been drinking now, and she tells my dad the exact same thing, how unhappy she is, what Russell's doing, blah, 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 blah. This is not something that my mom and my dad did often. Like, she'd call him up, hit him up for money, but she didn't just like lay it out there. And this was different. That 107-minute phone call with my dad was definitely not common at all. It was quick to the point. When she talked to Craig, my dad, I need some, where's the money? It was all about money. It's all she talked to my dad about. This was different. So I knew something was up there because she was talking to my dad a bunch. I think I got to talk to him for a minute. Hi, Dad. How you doing? But she always talked to my aunt. If you look at the phone bill, my aunt and my mom talked nightly, many times a night. So she'd be on the phone because she's lonely, but it would really just be to my aunt. But that phone call to my dad, I knew was not normal.
After Stacy and Craig broke up, Craig began another relationship with a woman named Betty, which lasted for about 7 years. The pair lived in Craig's home, but on the weekend of July 8th, they had recently broken up and Betty had moved out of Craig's home. When placing the call to Craig on the evening of July 8th, Stacy was not aware of this information. While confiding in Craig about Russell, Craig discloses the information with Stacy, and this was a pivotal point in their conversation. The pair began making plans for Stacy to pack up her home and take her 2 daughters with her to Craig's home. And this would happen the coming weekend since Russell would be going out of town.
Because my dad had a girlfriend for like 10 years after my mom, like 7 years after my mom and him broke up. And she had moved out on this weekend. On this particular week, July 8th, 1993, my dad had a big empty house. So then my mom calls him drunk, venting how unhappy she is. So my dad says, well, why don't you just come on back, Stacy? Let's make it work again. Mm-hmm. And that's when all the plans formed into motion for her to, when Russell was out of town that weekend to go to his culinary thing and taking her money, she was going to pack up the house. and she was going to go back to my dad. There would never be in my head that my mom was going back to my dad ever, because he had been with Betty for a long time. I knew that my dad had a girlfriend. I didn't know that he had an empty house on this weekend. I had no idea. So when my dad got custody of me that weekend after, I was released from foster care, he had a big empty house. And I had no idea. And eventually Betty moved back in because of what happened with my mom. And he started talking to Betty again, but it was never supposed to be. I had no idea that my dad and my mom were making these plans. It was just any other night. She was just pissed off. She was just more mad than normal,
Right. So definitely know, that gut feeling of something bad's going to happen. You didn't have any of those feelings that night. Okay.
I didn't have that until the flashlight went off at 1:50 in the morning when they're waking me up.
To know the human mind, which is again where the podcast kind of comes into play. But it is something that whenever you're looking for a lifelong mate, of knowing something, you pick the red flags and the issues that you can personally deal with. So it was probably, and this is my assumption, so you can stop me at any point here, but it was something where she saw Russell was kind of like this fever dream, if you want to say it, swept her off her feet, was an immediate, love bombing situation where she felt super happy, felt super secure. And then as time went on, the red flags started to pop up, and it was like, okay, this is not something that I want to spend the rest of my life in. And then it's a double down of, okay, she's talking to your father. She knows, she's been with him for a while, knows, all of the red flags that are there. And it's like, okay, maybe this situation wasn't as bad as I had taught it in my brain to be. Let's go back to that situation, because we probably shouldn't have ever left it. Yes, cool, I got another daughter, but this is probably where I should have been. You
nailed it.
Okay, because that was kind of what I understood, from talking to you so far, and then kind of what I was reading as well, was that it was a good situation in theory, what her and Russell had planned together, but in practice it was far from very good. So cool. I'm glad that I got that one good. After getting off the phone with Craig, Stacy called Wendy again, and Wendy's noted saying that Stacy was so much happier on the second call, which Wendy had no idea what had shifted for the sudden happiness in Stacy, but she was just overall happy that her sister was feeling better.
Well, my aunt talked to she called my aunt right after my dad. So my aunt is quoted as saying, on that second phone call, Stacy's happy. In the case file, Stacy's not happy the first time that she calls my aunt. She's venting, she's unhappy. Calls my dad, venting, unhappy. They make the plans. She calls my aunt back at around 10:30, and my aunt is even quoted in the case file. On the second phone call, Stacy's happy. She doesn't know why, because my dad and my aunt never got along. My mom didn't want to tell her that she's moving back with Craig. She didn't want to hear it. She just was happy, so she wanted to call my aunt yeah, I've got.
Around 11 p.m., Stacy had finished her phone calls and was just sitting on the couch in the living room when Nikki came around and hugged her from behind and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Stacy asked Nikki if she had walked the dog, and Nikki had lied and said she had. Nikki then goes to bed, and her little sister Christina was already in her room at this point. Some minutes later, Russell arrived home, and it was around 11:15 to 11:30. In an interview with police, Russell says he arrives home at 11:30. However, there was a phone call placed to Craig at 11:20 from the home. It is unclear if this was Russell or Stacy, but this call never connected. It never actually went through. Nobody spoke to Craig again. Craig never picked up the phone. This wasn't an actual connected call.
What I can remember is I don't know where we were during the day. I know Mom was working and she didn't get off until 6:00. So I don't know who was babysitting us or if I was just left at home. So because she did do that frequently and left me in charge of watching my sister. But I don't remember the morning. But I'll do tell you that I will remember the night, because I'll never forget that night. Mm-hmm. She's on the phone a bunch, because we know that as an adult. We've talked about it. But as a little kid, I'm running around with my little sister and I'm getting yelled at. Go to your room. Be quiet. Go outside. Just go away. Be quiet, because she's making all these important plans. And at 11 o'clock, she's done with her phone calls. And I come up behind her. She's sitting on the couch now. She's watching TV. There's a candle going. And we had a free floating couch. She wasn't up against a wall. So I was able to come behind her. And I gave her this hug. Side kiss. She asked me something like, did you brush your teeth or did you walk the dog? I think it might have been walk the dog. I know I lied. I said that I did, which I didn't. And I went to bed. And that was at around 11. And I drifted off to sleep and I heard Russell get home a couple minutes later. So he'll arrive between 11:15 and 11:30. And somebody from my house will call my dad again at 11:20. We don't know who that is. We don't know if it was my mom, because my dad says that he never picked up the phone again. It didn't connect. It was a 1-minute phone call. So we don't know if it was Russell walking in and like maybe star 69ing or trying to redial or something. Or what that deal was, or
he had been on the phone with.
Yeah, we don't know what the deal was, but somebody tried to call my dad at 11:20, and we know that Russell even admits that he's home by 11:30.
Upon arriving in the home, Russell brought a bottle of wine from their restaurant for the pair to share to make up for the fact that he had shown up later than he was supposed to. As he comes into the home, Stacy says, "Russell, you stink. Go take a shower." So Russell goes to the bathroom and takes a shower. So I do want to pause right here for just a second and bring up the recorder thing again. Nikki and I are both under the impression that at this point when Stacy tells Russell to go take a shower and he goes to the bathroom, that he's not actually taking a shower. He's actually listening to the recorded call. And this is how he figures out, that Stacy had talked to Craig and what the plans were and so on and so forth, because the details do get murky from this point on, because Nikki was asleep in her room and we only have Russell's versions of event of what happened at this point, which I would like to add make absolutely no sense whatsoever when you look at what he's actually saying.
And I guess it's all about he goes and takes a shower. She says that you stink, Russell, you stink, go take a shower. He takes a shower. They have a bottle of wine that he brought home from work, and that's when the conversation gets heated about a conversation that she had with Craig. So I don't know if she volunteers the conversation or if he finds out that she talked to my dad. But that's literally what started the whole fight. And in the case file, Russell will bring up my dad's name more than the police will prompt him and ask him about my dad. He keeps bringing up Craig. You can tell that Craig is a very sensitive subject for him. Cheating. And so that's why my mom was extra super vulgar on the telephone that night. Because she, according to my dad said that my mom said that, "I know Russell's listening to this, so I'm going to suck your dick dry. I want to fuck you 3 ways from Sunday. And I don't give a fuck if Russell's hearing this." And my dad to this day said that your mom was extra super dirty that night. All she wanted to do was dirty talk because of the recording. We don't know if that's all hearsay and speculation on if there is a recording, if he actually did come home and that's when he was taking the shower. So my dad's convinced when he was taking the shower, he was listening to their phone call that was 107 minutes. So he's in there, for an hour listening to that phone call.
According to Russell, after getting out of the shower, he comes into the living room and the pair open the bottle of wine. And they were talking, and the conversation turned heated, and we don't know if Stacy volunteers the conversation or if Russell finds out that she had talked to Craig by what I had just mentioned, but that's literally what the whole fight was over. And in the case note, Russell brings up Craig's name more than the police will prompt him to. And we're still looking at this case from Russell's perspective because unfortunately that's the only perspective that we have on the series of events. So after the conversation turned heated, from this point, Russell says that Stacy goes into the master bedroom, and when she enters the bedroom, she grabs a Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum revolver out of their closet. And I want to pause right here. I just want to talk about the gun for a second. The revolver was on top of a shelf in their closet, and the gun was Russell's gun. He bought it, and it was registered to him. This gun was not in a safe, so it was just kind of on a shelf under some clothes. So I just kind of want you to paint that picture in your head. And I asked Nikki about this gun and, if her mother would have ever grabbed a gun or anything like that, and she kind of told me a story, which I'll insert that audio here.
Zero interest. And I'm going to tell you a story that my mom's friend just recently told me. So my mom had a friend named Lori Swift, and Lori Swift had a boyfriend. Okay. So the 4 of them would hang out. Lori Swift, her boyfriend, my mom, and my dad. Okay. So the boyfriends became friends and they started shooting guns together, right? They became friends because of the girlfriends. Well, one day Lori goes, "Hey, my boyfriend wants to return this gun to Craig. Will you take it home to him?" And she refused to transport that weapon because I was in the vehicle. My mom did not like guns, didn't have any interest in guns. When my dad would go shooting, she'd sit in the car. This was not her forte. So on the night that she planned on leaving this guy, why the hell would she go grab a gun to try to shoot him with her 2 children in the house?
Right.
Not only that, but like one of them would have been pointed my way. It's illogical. The more logical story is the fact that he found out she wanted to leave and he grabbed the gun because he was upset with her. Not my mother grabbing the gun. There's no reason for her to grab a gun.
So, and I'm assuming it was Russell's gun.
It was registered to Russell Bennett Peterson and not in a safe.
Okay.
And loaded.
So where was the gun in? So I'm assuming obviously in the master bedroom, but do you know like the general vicinity of where
he kept the loaded gun on the top shelf of the closet underneath some clothing? So he had to go into the closet, reach up there and grab the gun, which was kind of high for my mom. You know, she'd have to stand on her tippy toes in order to get it. So
for him to not for her to be able to grab that gun and him not to notice what she was doing would have been, like you said, illogical.
Yeah, just illogical. His whole story falls apart. I mean, it never happened. She would have never shot towards my bedroom. Why would she try to shoot him? Why the hell would she try to shoot him? She had no reason to kill him. She just wanted to leave him. B, right. Why the hell would she come out to the living room and pop off a shot towards her daughter's bedroom? Right. That is just any mother. It's stupid. And C, they're trying to say all of this went down with her left hand because remember, Kenzie, there's no gunpowder residue present on her right hand. She's right-handed. So that means that she pulled off, according to them, the cops and Russell, that she pulled off not 1 shot, but 2 shots with an undominant left hand from a 44 Magnum Ruger Red Hawk. That is called a bear defense gun. It's got a kickback that you got to hold with 2 hands. A man's got to hold with 2 hands. Let alone a 138-pound drunk woman popping off 2 shots with the left hand. His story falls apart when you talk to any logical gun owner.
Right.
Guns were something that she was used to. My dad had guns, but he's a responsible gun owner. My dad always had a gun safe because, he's a kid. Russell didn't have a gun safe. I know that the gun safe thing was irritating. You just don't have my mom was a mother, a very responsible mother. So I know that she didn't like the fact that there wasn't in like a little locked box. It was just sitting on a shelf. She had no interest in the gun. It sat up on the shelf. I think Russell fired it 1 time in the time that he had it before this happened. It wasn't something that he would go out and do. I don't think my mom thought about it a bunch because Russell wasn't an avid outdoorsman like my dad was. But again, my dad was a responsible gun owner, keeping his in a safe. So I didn't ever hear about the gun. I don't even think I knew a gun existed, to be honest with you.
Like Nikki said in the audio, Stacy was not a very tall woman. So it would have taken her a minute to be able to grab this gun without Russell knowing what she was doing. And the way that Russell explains what I'm about to say next, he makes it sound like it was a very quick thing, right? Like she got up from the living room, went into the master bedroom, grabbed this gun really quickly, and then the following happens. Russell says she goes into the bedroom and she comes back out and she has a gun in her hand and she cocks it back and she goes, "Russell, I'm going to shoot you." And I put my hands up and I said, "Steph, what are you talking about here?" According to the police report, Russell claims that Stacy shot at him but missed, and he followed her into the bedroom where the final shot took place. So we are unsure of what actually transpired in the master bedroom at this point. So according to police reports, Russell says that the 2 of them were fairly close together. That's how Stacy ends up getting shot. I don't necessarily believe this, but I'm going to reserve my thoughts on this case for the case notes specifically. Like I said, we're unsure of what time, the fatal shot is taken for Stacy to then be pronounced dead.
My aunt believes about 25 minutes he had to stage the crime scene. Because it's reported that the altercation began about 1:15. That's in the Red Rock News report and the case file, 1:15. But he won't call 911 until 1:40.
But according to phone records, Russell made 2 calls. One was to his father, which took place at 1:36 a.m. and the call lasted for about a minute. And then there was another call at 1:40 a.m. where Russell calls 911.
And mind you, before he calls 911, he'll call someone else at 1:36. It's on the phone bill. So 4 minutes before he calls 911, he's calling his dad in Glendale, Arizona. It's right there. It's evidence. He doesn't ever mention that to the Sedona Police Department in their interrogations. The Sedona Police Department doesn't ever look into that 1:36 phone call or why he placed that, what they talked about. It was never investigated. Another missed opportunity. The Sedona Police Department never subpoenaed for that phone bill. They let the suspect bring it in 3 months after my mother's murder. My mother was murdered in July of 93. The Sedona Police Department will not receive that hard evidence until October of 1993. If they ever did anything with it, they ever actually looked at it, I don't know, because they never investigated that 136 phone call. Why is he calling other people before 911?
And Nikki actually has this audio on her TikTok profile and gave me permission to use that clip in my podcast. So I'm going to play the 911 call for you now.
911, what's your emergency?
I need help.
What kind of help, sir?
There has been a very bad accident.
We're at
It's 530 Coffee Pot Drive. In Sedona.
Okay, how many vehicles?
No, there's no vehicles. Me and my wife, we were in an argument, and she's hurt. She's hurt very bad. I need help.
Okay, what's wrong with her?
She's been shot.
She was shot?
Yes.
Who shot her?
We were... I don't know.
You don't know who shot her?
She might have shot herself.
Okay, how old is she?
She's 20, she's 31 years old, 32.
32?
So at this point, the 911 call has been made. Police are on their way. Nikki is still asleep in her room. Christina's awake at this point. So I want that piece of information to just kind of keep that in the back of your head for just a little bit because she is awake at this point. A few minutes after the 911 call, cops show up at the home. And we're going to pivot to Nikki's side of the story from here because I want to touch on her bit because it gets a little bit weird from here.
And the cops, when they came to find me, they couldn't find the light switch to the garage. So they turned their flashlights on, and that's how they woke me up. And I forever traumatized with the flashlight shine in my face. And they told me, get up, get dressed. And I'm terrified because they're not telling me what's going on. I have cops in my room as a 10-year-old. I'm freaking the fuck out. They just say, your mom and her boyfriend got into a fight. Get up, get dressed. So I get dressed and they usher me. That's when I knew something was wrong because there's cops in my room. Mm-hmm. And when I went to bed, the house was dark. And now that the cops are escorting me up my little stairs, I round the corner to go into the kitchen. It's like Christmas. Like, whoa, there's lights on everywhere. And I turn the corner and we go into like the breakfast nook. And now I can see the living room. Cop is in front of me trying to shield me from seeing, but I can see right where I had said goodnight to my mom. She was on that couch. Well, Russell's sitting there. And he's got blood on his hands and he's doing this like rocking thing. And there's like cops standing all around him and they get me out of the house so fast. So I only got a couple seconds to see that and I'll never forget it. And they get me in the cop car. And that's when I see my sister. She's already in the car and she sees me and she's all chipper. And she's like, Poppy killed mommy. Poppy killed mommy. Poppy killed mommy. And saying it like that, like excited, like a cartoon character because she doesn't understand what she just saw.
Yeah.
But she knows something big just happened. And for about 20 minutes, she'll just repeat like a parrot that Poppy killed our mommy.
Like Nikki said, she was escorted out of the home and her sister was already in the car. And at this point, like she said, the only thing that she had been told was that Russell and her mother got in a fight and that they needed to leave right then and there. So in the cruiser, it was at this point, Nikki and Christina. And this part that I'm about to talk about is so insane to me. I have never heard of this in my life before. And I do want to touch on the Sedona Police Department real quick. In my interview with Nikki, she was telling me how the Sedona Police Department at this point, when the case took place, was only 4 years old. So it had only been developed in 1989. So they were very unequipped, which is no fault of their own. It was a small police department. It had just started up, but they did not have the means necessary to handle a homicide. And because of that, this case was seriously neglected. Because if you look at just the facts of this case, it's almost abundantly clear of what happened. It's very sad that this is still unsolved to this day. After putting Nikki and her sister Christina in the cruiser, instead of putting Russell in his own cruiser to separate him from his two daughters, because at this point, they're young, they're impressionable, he's put in the car with the two girls. I've never heard of that before. Why would you put a potential suspect in the same car with children who are impressionable and, he could then, manipulate them into making sure that their stories fit the narrative that he is wanting, you know, especially because Christina's only 3 years old, you know, Nikki's 10, she's not sure what's going on. It's just very weird. And I do want to insert Nikki's audio from her recollection of this event because it is very creepy, it's very weird, very disgusting.
Until they bring him out and they put him in the same squad car as the children. Now he is a suspect for murder.
Yeah, and
is it not typical to separate the children and the suspects? So I'm giving you a little context on how they handled the situation. The Sedona Police Department was not equipped to handle this in 1993. They were a 4-year-old organization when my mother was murdered. Before 1989, the Sedona area was so small, it was policed by the Verde Valley Police. So in 1993, they're a 4-year-old organization. My mom's homicide was probably one of the first murders that they did. And so they put the suspect for domestic homicide in the same car as the children. That gave Russell the opportunity to touch and squeeze on me. He got to whisper shit in my ear, like shit to the effect of, I'm sorry, and I love you, and I want to keep the family together. That if you want to see what was a real big red flag, Kenzie, it was when he said, I want to keep the family together. And when he was in the cop car squeezing on me, that's when I knew this isn't just a fight. There's something wrong. Yeah. But I didn't know. Nobody will tell me for another 16 hours that my mom's dead. Another super bizarre event, because they'll take us to foster care. They'll tell me my mom and Russell got into a fight, but I'll never see my mom. They'll only see Russell. They'll take us to the cop station. We'll sit there for a little bit until foster care comes and gets us. Foster care puts us immediately to bed. They want us to sleep. Then they wake us up that next morning, it's afternoon, and all my family's there, but nobody's telling me anything. But like my uncle's crying, like fucking weird. And like, I don't understand what's going on, but all my family's around and they're acting all weird. And I swear to God, it's not till the next day when they pull me and my little sister into a building. It must be the Sedona Police Department, into a little room, and it had chairs in a circle and there were toys in the middle on the ground. And so my sister runs over there and she goes and starts playing with the blocks and the toys. And they have me sit in one of these chairs, and there's all these people I don't recognize. And Russell's one of these people, and they have him. I'll never forget it. He will be the one to tell me that my mom is dead. And in front of all these people, like it was an event, like a staged production. Yeah. So I'm assuming it was psychologists. I'm assuming it was detectives. I'm just assuming all these weird people in this circle were somehow related to the investigation, but they made him tell me.
Stacy planned on ending the relationship between her and Russell at this point, and that, to me, is clear motive for Russell to, you know, just kind of snap and freak out because he didn't want to lose his daughter, because Christina was the apple of the eye for the family, and it's just very, very strange for, you know, this to be the series of events that was going to take place, Russell to find out about it, and, you know, 3 hours after being off the phone with Craig and making these plans, Stacy's now dead. So if you just look at the timeline of, you know, what took place before the murder and, you know, the 911 audio and how calm Russell is, I actually asked Nikki about, you know, her feelings about this 911 call.
After 29 years, we waited to get the 911 call last summer of 2022. We finally obtained that from the Sedona Police Department. We got that 911 call about a week before the Sedona Police Department sat down with Fox News. Fox News had been pressuring Sedona Police Department for about 2 months for this interview. A week before this interview was conducted was when I received that 911 call. I'll never forget when we put it in the zip drive, put it in the computer, and we pressed play. I was sitting with my family, my aunt and her daughter. And I remember he was too calm. I stood up. The second he said, there's been an accident, I had to go turn to a wall because I was so distraught. I couldn't even look at my family. I stared at a wall and listened to his rendition of what happened. And I just kept saying, he's too calm. She's dying on the ground. Why is he not hysterical? Why is he not freaking out? Why does it sound like he's ordering a fucking pizza? He's too calm. And then the other thing that really upset me was that you can hear my little sister in the background. Daddy, Papi, Papi, Mommy. You can hear that. It's very distressing. At one point, he's like, go in the other room, go away, because she's touching my mom. She readily admits that she's trying to put the blood back in Mommy. It's horrific. The 911 call is absolutely horrific because I don't feel like he cared at all. He was more worried about himself.
And making
he
himself...
didn't want to get help for my mom. He didn't want to apply any CPR.
2 months after the actual incident took place, Russell came back to the police department and his story had changed at this point. His story has changed multiple times throughout this entire investigation, which to me is the first indicator of a red flag. If your story is not staying consistent every single time you're talking to the police, that is a red flag for deception.
Well, I won't even know. I won't read the case file until I'm 38 years old. So I won't even know about his changing stories until I read it for myself as an adult. I won't have anything to do with the case. I wasn't mentally ready to even know. I didn't even know where my mom was shot until I read the case file. I knew that she was murdered. My family would talk about it. I knew that Russell did it. And I knew that what my dad had told me, but I didn't know that his story had changed so extensively until I read it for myself. It took me several weeks to get through the case files because of all the panic attacks. I remember getting very upset with the victim blaming and blaming my mom for her own death. It's very frustrating.
So the case reached the county's attorney general office, which no charges were ever filed due to insufficient evidence. The evidence overall shows that, it was a homicide, and Dr. Philip Keene actually did rule the death as a homicide. Now, Russell's conflicting stories and the absence of clear motive for Stacy's alleged suicide left investigators very confused. Upon the death of Stacy, the unit was completely torn apart. Nikki went to go live with her father, and Russell, who was a free man, got to have custody of Christina. Now, he would keep Christina away from her mother's side of the family totally.
Oh, it completely shattered it, Kenzie. Just shattered it. My mother's side of the family, because I'll go and live with my father and Christina will go with her father. He will never be prosecuted. He will never go to jail. He'll keep pass and go for 30 years. So he gets to raise his daughter, and he will deny us access to Christina for 6 months to a year. I won't see her again till the next summer. And that's when she tells me now that mommy's killed herself. So now he's brainwashing her. And after that, he won't even let us see her for another decade. So he kept her away from us. I grew up without my sister. I barely know her now as an adult. We're kind of like just ships in the night. She's a person that I know is related to me, but we didn't grow up together, which is very unfortunate. Barely any. He kept her away from us. And when she was about 14, so I'd be in my 20s, about 10 years later, she'll run away from him and she'll go to her stepmom, because he'll get married right away after my mom to a lady, Diane Peterson, have a son, but she'll immediately divorce Russell. Well, that woman's still going to be in my sister's life. She's like the stepmom because she has a little brother. So when she ran away at the age of like 14, she ran home to Diane Peterson, and Diane let her live there. And that's when Diane was letting Christina, call her family. So Christina called grandma, and grandma called my dad's house, and he called me because I was living on my own. I was in my 20s. He's like, Nikki, your sister's looking for you. So briefly in my early 20s, when she was in her teens, we reconnected, and I was driving down to Diane's house, and I'm seeing my sister and getting to rebuild a little bit with her. He raised my sister to believe that our mother shot herself.
Okay.
So that it was a suicide. So that is why that suicide whole scenario exists, because he's spewing that jargon to my sister for years. Now, when she's able to talk to me about it, when she's a little bit older, I mean, she knows that her dad's a liar. She gets very uncomfortable when I approach her about talking about mom's case. She'll look down, she'll shuffle her hands. I can tell she doesn't want to engage in the conversation. So because she was raised by him, she feels differently. I don't know if she could fully believe it, that our mother was murdered by him. I don't know what she believes, to be honest. I know that she wanted to be involved in the investigation originally in 2020 when they called, and she agreed to do a confrontation call with her dad. But then she fell off the face of the earth. I have not heard from her since she called me in July of 2020. I don't know if she's alive or dead. Pretty sure she just doesn't want to deal with this.
Right.
Like, she does not want to be involved with getting her dad charges. So she's literally hiding from me, because I know she knows about this by now.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think she wants to.
After Stacy's death, Russell gets in another relationship and eventually gets married and goes on to have a son with his new wife. While in this marriage with his new wife, he actually confesses to the murder of Stacy to his new wife.
Kind of, learning more about the Diane lady, and she's opening up to me and she's telling me about her time with Russell, and she'll tell me that Russell will confess to her about murdering my mother. He will tell her that he'll start laundry before he calls the police, that he takes a shower before he calls the police, and that he makes phone calls before he calls the cops. This is a confession, and she will tell me this. I will tell the Sedona Police Department this exact information. I don't know if they've done anything with this information and gone and interviewed the Diane Peterson lady. I have no idea.
As we've already discussed, the Sedona Police Department did not have the resources available to handle a homicide, let alone a domestic homicide. So I wanted to ask Nikki what her overall thoughts on how the police handled this case, just how she felt about the ongoing investigation in general, and what her overall thoughts were on where she sees this case going in the future.
I have been very dissatisfied. For 28 years, I will depend on the Sedona Police Department to do something because I didn't think I was capable of doing anything myself. Mm-hmm. So in 2020, when I found out that they were reinvestigating, I was over the moon. Oh my God, they're going to do something. Yeah. And then when I found out they didn't want to talk to me, I realized they weren't going to do anything and I had to tag in. And ever since I've tagged in, it has been an ongoing struggle to get information, to get any kind of compassion, to get anything from them, to be honest with you. They won't even email me back. So I have been very disgruntled with the Sedona Police Department and the Yavapai County's Attorney's Office because they're both pointing their fingers at each other. Nobody wants to, they keep passing the buck for this. Nobody wants to, man up. I'm very unhappy. In March of 2022, we received a letter from the Sedona Police Department. It has 5 paragraphs and it enraged me. Mm-hmm. It is no compassion. They're basically telling us to fuck off and that I'm harassing the Sedona Police Department. I'll send it to you. I would love it for you if you would read it, spotlight it, show it, because this is what I've gotten from the Sedona Police Department is zero compassion. Okay. They treat me like a perpetrator, not the victim of a loved one. The Attorney General directed me to the DOJ. So the Attorney General is just going to tell you to call the DOJ. I've already done this route. The DOJ has sent the FBI to my house. The FBI we sent to the Sedona Police Department. We told them that they are a new organization. We need your help. They need your help. Agent Craps went out to Sedona in July of 2022, and Sedona Police Department refused any assistance from the federal government. Oh God, from the start, just putting the children in the same car as the suspect of a domestic violence homicide. That's where they first of all went wrong to begin with. They didn't pull his clothing. They let him sit in the clothing while they interrogated him for up to 6 hours. They should have taken him right then, get his clothing, bagged his hands. They didn't test his hands for gunpowder residue. So many missed opportunities that could have proven what he's done that they didn't let go. So essentially, Sedona Police Department is just letting a murderer walk free because they were inequipped to handle this. And now they don't want any help from the outside federal government. It's like an ego thing.
I found Nikki through a friend tagging me in her TikTok, and in this TikTok, she was pleading with content creators of true crime and just content creators in general to speak her mother's case and to report on this case. So due to the circumstances in which I found Nikki, I wanted to ask her opinion on how the media handled this case and what her overall thoughts were on how we as content creators for true crime could help spread the word about her mother's case.
I'm frustrated again. That's going to be my answer for that. I've had to beg, borrow, and steal to get people to listen. So the first reporter that reached out to me was ABC, Ashley Perez. I was over the moon. I was like, yes. She gave me all these pointers to do. She told me to contact Sarah Turney. She told me to start a TikTok. She gave me like the basis of how to go. Mm-hmm. And then she just was gone. Mm-hmm. She never released a story. She ghosted me, never. So Fox News has been amazing. Fox News has been the only media organization to put anything in print on my mother. Other than that, it's all just podcasts, true crime podcasts. The media has been very frustrating. The media has been very frustrating. I don't know why a family member of victim has to get on camera and make it entertaining to get you to pay attention. And that's essentially, I've had to bring you into my life and show you the trauma that I'm going through and become a hysterical middle-aged woman. Right. So that you'll pay attention to me.
Since Craig, Nikki's father, was the last one to speak with Stacy, other than her sister Wendy, the night of her murder, I wanted to ask Nikki what her father thought about the overall handling of this case, where he saw the investigation going, and just how he felt about everything in general.
He doesn't think that anything will ever come of this. He is convinced that Russell Bennett Peterson got away with the murder of my mother. He was very impressed that I got the Sedona Police Department to come down and interview him in person. Finally, after 30 years, he got to tell his side of the story, February of 2023. So it's been less than a year since my dad's official record has been on file. Since then, he's gotten, again, less enthusiastic because it's been a year. My dad still doesn't think that anything's going to come of this. He thinks that all of this social media stuff is hogwash. He thinks that I'm wasting my time. He was impressed with the Fox News story. So I'm still trying to get my dad on board with this. Mm-hmm. So he knows what happens. He's just, because he's gone through it for 30 years and nobody's cared to come and talk to him. He is a doubter. He is a hater, and he doesn't believe. But I want to make him a believer.
30 years after this case has taken place, and, you know, after examining all the details and all of the information and seeing Nikki's side of events and what she remembers, I wanted to ask her what her overall thoughts were on Russell and if she thought that there would be any justice or what kind of closure she may be seeking from Russell, knowing what she knows about the case, knowing what she knows about how it was handled, and mainly just overall how she felt about the case and how she felt about Russell. Like, you know,
oh, he's a liar. He's a weasel. Oh, he could have just admitted that it was an accident years ago and just gotten a slap on the wrist, you know, some second degree manslaughter. He could have spent, you know, 5, 6, whatever and been out. Instead, now I'm going to hunt him down for the rest of my life because he's a weasel. He could have been a man and admitted this. Instead, he wants to victim blame and turn the narrative because he didn't want to be a man and face what he's done. Mm-hmm. I don't like the man.
In my interview with Nikki, I really wanted to get a sense of understanding of how the death of Stacy has really affected not only her, but her entire family dynamic and the other members of her family. And Nikki was very honest and open with me about this, so I want you guys to take the time and listen to what she has to say.
My mom's whole family, from my grandma to her siblings to all the cousins, they were all equally shattered in one way or another because it affected grandma. She became a really bad alcoholic, didn't want to leave the house. The same thing with my aunt. She became agoraphobic, and, you know, substance abuse was prevalent in our family after this because everybody wanted to drown their own sorrows in one way or another. Our family was very close. It's a big Russian family. And, you know, she had 5 other siblings. You know, that's 5 other different family units that you've just shattered because one person made a bad decision and grabbed a gun. So right. Our lives were all over, and I have still not recovered 30 years later. I'm picking up the pieces by doing this now. Oh, I didn't cope for a long time. I ran from this. I was a drug abuser. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know why I was doing drugs, but I was running from my mother's murder. I didn't process this as a child. I started using drugs at 18, 19. I got sober for a while and then fell back into it. Mm-hmm. It's keeping me sober. It's keeping me sober, but I'm honestly losing my mind on a daily basis because you got to re-traumatize yourself. The hate keeps me going. I'm very angry, and I've been an angry person my whole life. People that know me know that, like, I'll flip. You know, I'll get angry just out of no reason, and I know why I have that anger. It's because of this, and I'm working on that. It's just, how has it affected me? It has shattered my life in more ways than I can tell you in this couple second segment, but I'm hoping that with this finding justice, I can kind of piece it together and be able to move on and put this behind me. I don't know.
Now, Russell's conflicting stories and the absence of clear motive for Stacy's alleged suicide left investigators very confused. What exactly transpired, we're unsure. But, you know, as you've heard, Nikki is very much adamant that her mother's death was a murder, fueled by the belief that, you know, Stacy would never touch a gun. And as we piece together, you know, the fragments of the puzzle, you know, it's definitely something sinister. And I want to, you know, all of us to kind of follow this case and help Nikki where we can. There's a couple ways for us to do that. There's a petition that Nikki started, and I want to allow her to kind of speak on this, so I'm going to insert the audio of her talking about this. And on the other side of it, with addition to the petition, you know, let's put pressure on this police department, put pressure on the people in charge, put pressure on this legal system, because they have failed this family and they have failed this woman who did not deserve to die and deserves to see justice. Some kind of closure is all this family really wants. For the last half of this episode, I asked Nikki a couple questions regarding, you know, just overall closure and what she wants to see come from, you know, this podcast, her outreach, everything that she's doing. So I'm going to insert that audio here.
A very simple person. She didn't want to go to college. She had no great aspirations to be a doctor or a lawyer. She just wanted to create a happy little family of what she didn't have as a child. And she did manage that for a few years. So I want people to know that my mother would never grab a gun, that she was very proud of her children and the family that she's created, and that she would never put them in harm's way, or she would never have left them if it was her choice. I would like an arrest, but to answer that question, I would like him to acknowledge if you gave me the choice, if it was my choice, I would let Russell Bennett Peterson get away with not spending a day in jail if he would just admit to what he's done. Say it.
Just hearing.
Say what you did. Admit that she never grabbed the gun, that she just take away the lies and the slander. Make it right. And I wouldn't make him go to jail. It's not up to me, though.
Right.
I'll tell you what Sarah told me. You are your loved one's own best advocate. Don't wait for the police. If you want to do what I've done, you could do it. I emulated everything with Sarah. I know Sarah personally. We used to work together at TGI Fridays. I have modeled everything I've done after her in order to get some kind of success. And if you want to do what I've done, I would suggest you do the same. Get the case file and a camera. That's all it takes. A case file and a camera, and you can do what we've done. That's a roller coaster. That comes and goes. Some days I feel like I'm on, we're going to get it. And then other days I feel completely defeated. There's never going to be any justice. And all I can do is speak on it. Mm-hmm. And I'll never stop speaking on it. So I try to release a TikTok daily on the fact that he murdered my mother. So there's not going to be any justice by, trial. I will get justice by community. I will continue to speak on the fact that he did this and he's gotten away with it. So it is my lifelong mission now. So if he never goes to jail, I will spend the rest of my life speaking on this.
If anyone wants to, support you or help you get justice or, get this information out there, kind of tell me what they can do to help you.
Oh God, if you're a true crime content creator, I want to talk to you. If you have 1 follower or 1 million followers, I want to talk to you. I want to be on your TikTok channel, your YouTube channel, your podcast. Let's make a movie. Let's do something together. Let's write a book. I don't care what kind of connection you have. If you have some kind of connection, you felt compelled to reach out to me, please do. I will interview with you. Let's help get my mom's story out there. Media has been my best friend. A lot of people are misunderstanding that viral video, thinking that the podcasts are bad. No, these podcasts are my saving grace. These people are my heroes. They're helping my mom's story be told. People finally know who she is because of you guys. And I can't thank you enough for helping us. We do have a petition. It's got about 2,000 signatures now. I would love it to have 2 million. Mm-hmm. So if you could sign the petition, it's linked on my TikTok bio page, or I'm sure Kenzie will link it in these show notes and you can sign it for me. It's just basically to present a complete case file to a grand jury of our peers. Let our peers decide if there's enough evidence to take this to the prosecutor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then my final question for you before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to say to anyone who may have information about what happened that night?
Oh, Diane Peterson. Oh, please, Diane Peterson, or anybody that knew Russell Peterson and he might have told you what he did on July 9th, 1993. If you have any information, please contact the Sedona Police Department. Please. Sergeant Laura Leon is the contact. Please reach out to her. And once again, like Diane Peterson, I know what you told me. Please tell that to the active investigators. Please help my family get some kind of closure. We talked when I was a child, when I was a young adult. You know how this affected me. If you're watching now, please, for a Christmas gift to me, contact the Sedona Police Department.
But that is all I have for you guys this week. Again, this was a insane case that is so frustrating, and a lot of the comments that I saw on Nikki's TikTok posts were, how is this case unsolved? How is there insufficient evidence? And I don't think that there was insufficient evidence. I think there was an insufficient means to capture that evidence that was present. And, it's been 30 years since this case originally took place. And, here we are, Russell's still walking free. We still, it was ruled as a homicide, but no charges were filed. It's very strange to see, a death ruling like that and there not be anyone held accountable for those actions. This case definitely raises a lot of eyebrows, and it's extremely frustrating, and I feel so bad for Nikki and her family, and just, knowing the details of the case and not being able to say the court said that Russell did it, and just having that feeling. But I want to know what your thoughts are on this case. Please, let's start the discussion. Twitter, I am available to talk about this. I think the more that we talk about Stacy, the more that puts pressure on legislatives and everything like that. Now, there is a couple of other ways that we can, put pressure on them. The Sedona Police Department, and say, hey, what's the status on the case? Call the DA's office. I will put all of that information available for you guys on my case notes, because we need to apply pressure, because this case and this family deserves closure. Thank you so much for joining me on True Crime with Kenz this week. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review, follow me on social media. Make sure you check out the case notes on the website. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, there is a link to the Patreon on the website. Do not feel obligated in any way, shape, or form. Until next time, stay vigilant. I will see you next Thursday. And this is Kenzie signing off.